Alright, so today we're going to be using some pink butcher paper. I usually use aluminum foil, but I finally got my hands on this. I'm going to be testing it out. Here I have my USDA Prime Brisket. I found a pretty good one today. It's about a 13 pounder. This one had a nice thick overall even flat. Usually when I go to my wholesaler Sam's Club, I could never find a good one for some reason. Here we're using some rib rack barbecue rub and some sea salt. I've never used that barbecue rub before, but gonna try something out new. So here we're gonna go ahead and cut this open, but before we do that, we want to go ahead and line some paper towels out onto our cutting board. This is going to absorb all of that meat juice when we go ahead and pat it down dry. So we'll get that bottom portion. We won't have to worry about soaking up our cutting board. And we'll do this directly over the sink just to prevent any splatter and messes. And here we go, we're just opening it up right now in the sink. I'm just using some scissors to cut open the top. Usually want to start on either side when cutting it open, so that way you prevent spillage all over the place. And right here you can see I transferred my brisket over. Now I'm just pulling out some paper towels, patting the top dry, and as you can see, this is now dry on the bottom side. Just from laying down those paper towels made a huge difference. So here we're cutting off the fat. Right now I'm removing this hard fat. I'm not going to remove too much fat. We're going to keep it, pretty consistent. You can go ahead and trim it up as much as you want, but right here I'm just going to remove some of this freezer burn, that brown meat that you see right here, and just removing some of that fat from on top of the meat side, but just removing a little bit of excess fat. And then right over here, on the other side, just want to remove a little, just want to keep it pretty consistent. As you can see, I went a little too deep, so just be mindful and try not to go to the meat. So this is my waist right here, about a pound or so, not much, pound or two, but we'll go ahead and we'll discard that. So now for the fun part, we're gonna go ahead and season it up. Right now I'm just sprinkling the sea salt on the top. You wanna make sure you get a nice coat of sea salt down first. Sea salt is definitely going to help with the smoke ring. This is how I've always had my success getting my smoke rings. And try not to use the iodized salt. The iodized salt will, make it a little too salty. So I like to use the sea salt, has some nice flavor to it. Be generous, it's a thick cut of meat, so it's not gonna penetrate all the way in. You will notice whenever you do finish your brisket, the smokiness typically doesn't come, the pink ring doesn't come on the fat side. You're only gonna get your smoke ring on the pink side, and depending on how thick the fat is, you may get a little penetration to the meat. But here we're just gonna go ahead and add our barbecue rub, and you wanna make sure that you get it thoroughly coated. We don't wanna see any of the meat exposed. I applied that same principle when I applied the salt. You wanna sprinkle the meat as much as possible. And if you do decide to pat it in, or press the rub in, you don't want to rub it with your hands. You just want to pat it. My hands are kind of moist, and I don't feel like drying off my hands right now, so that's why I'm not going to be patting mine in. And as you can see, we're just going to apply the same concept to the other side. We've already done the sides, so the meat portion is going to be a lot easier, because all I have to do at this point is just do the top part. And here we're adding a nice coat of sea salt. We'll follow up with some barbecue, with some of that beef rub, or that, Another thing to note, as you can see, I'm doing this inside of one of these serving dishes. It was the biggest dish I had, and this is just going to help capture all of this excess seasoning that falls down. I'm still getting a little on the counter right here, but it does do a better job than most other pans that I have, since they are a lot smaller. When we do place this on the smoker, we are going to place this fat side down, so just keep that in mind. And then also, I didn't mention it, but well, I'll get to that in a second. So we're using oak pellets right now. I've never used oak pellets, so I want to give it a shot. But here we go. We're putting it down, fat side down, and we're just gonna sprinkle that excess over the top. Just, you know, whatever fell off in the pan. Whenever you do transfer it over, you're gonna have, you know, a couple of areas where you do lose some seasoning just because you grabbed it. So 3 hours into the cook, and we're smoking at 250 degrees. We're not gonna go up or down. My pellet smoker does deviate a little bit, but we're at a constant 250 right now, and I'm just checking to see if the rub is sticking. So right there on those dry spots, it did stick, but over here on these fattier sides, it's not sticking as well, so that's okay. It's only been 3 hours, and we're about at 138 degrees. So we'll continue to let this smoke untouched. Here we are. We are now at the 6 hour mark. I like to get my briskets a little darker than this, but you know, we're at a pretty good stopping point at this point. I'm just, right now, I want to test out that butcher paper. That's my end goal. We're at the wrapping point between 165 and 175. So we'll just go ahead and we'll pull this off at this point, and we'll get it wrapped up with, you know, a double layer of some of that pink butcher paper, as you will see in just a moment. Alright, so here we go. We are putting the brisket down on the butcher paper, and just a quick shout out to my wife, Mom in the Kitchen. She has a cooking channel on YouTube as well. She's still growing her channel. I'm doing pretty well. So just, you know, shout out to her. I can link her profile in the description. So one thing over here, I should have lined it up before trying to wrap. As you can see, one side was short, so I'm just centering it. And all you're gonna do is just, you wanna make sure this is tight as possible. You're just gonna tuck it into the front, crunch the wrap, and kind of crease the side so that way you can get it nice and folded up. And what we'll do is we'll put this back in the smoker. So we were smoking with fat side down, now we're gonna smoke with fat side up. And the reason why we're gonna do that is so that way that fat juice trickles down into the meat. So now, you know, the bottom is protected by this butcher paper. At this point, we're 9 hours into the cook, and we are trying to target anywhere from 200 to 205 degrees. So as you can see right here, we are getting that temperature. We are at 200 degrees right here. The hardest part about sticking the probe in was just penetrating through the paper, but as you can see, it's going in just like, you know, just like butter. So this thing is ready to pull out and to stick into a cooler and let it rest. One thing I would definitely advise is getting some kind of insulated gloves so that way you don't burn your hands. But here we are. I have it inside of an aluminum tray to prevent some of those juices from seeping down. And now, 30 minutes later, here we are. We're going to go ahead and unwrap this, and I'll just speed up the process. But right here, as you can see, we got that nice jiggle. That jiggle is, you know, typically what you want to target whenever you are cooking a brisket. It's moving nicely. So we'll just go ahead and remove this paper, and then we'll get it sliced up. Now, you typically want to let it rest for about an hour to 2 hours, and I was rushing this, so I only let it rest for about 25-30 minutes, venting it at about 15 minutes. So you want to make sure you vent this a lot to let some of that hot air escape. But right now it is piping hot, and when I am slicing this up, you are going to see that, you know, I keep burning my hands a little bit. Look at that steam coming off the brisket. Once I get into it, you're going to see a lot more steam come out. But you want to make sure you slice against the grain, and I know which way the grain runs over here because I remember that pointy side. I took note of that before I stuck it onto the smoker. But we got a nice little smoke ring right there, and yeah, now we're just going to go ahead and get this sliced up. You want to do about 1/4 inch thick slices. If your meat is a little tough and you may have messed up a little bit, you are going to want to go a little thinner just so that way you can have a little more tender of a piece. If it's too tender, you might want to go a little thicker just to prevent it from breaking completely apart. But I got mine cooked perfectly, so I'm going about 1/4 inch. And right here, you see all that steam coming off. I kind of burnt my hand a little bit from how hot it was doing the bend test. It has a nice bend to it. And then we'll go ahead and do the pull test. I can barely get my hands on it, it's so hot, but as you can see, it pulled off easily. Nice juicy piece right there, almost from the center. Usually I like to grab my slices from the center whenever I do present them, but it was close enough, and it was a really nice piece of meat. Here we are, we are at the point. I should have cut off a little more because, as you can see, there's a little bit of flat still remaining, but I'm just gonna go ahead and slice this right down the middle, so that way I have something a little more manageable and easy to work with. And as you can see, just, you know, I'm barely touching the meat with that knife, and it is just cutting right through. And look at all that juicy tenderness right there. Juice is just seeping out, all that flavor. So we're gonna cut about 1/2 inch thick slices over here. Usually, sometimes I will, you know, chunk this up into 1 inch little chunks and then throw it back on the smoker to get some burnt ends. But I didn't have the time for that today, so I'm just gonna finish this portion up, cutting these 1/2 inch thick slices. And just look at that tenderness, look at that juice falling out. It's just amazing. And this is what you want whenever you are cooking your brisket. So if you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And yeah, I look forward to posting more videos in the future.